All right, we're going to get started. And maybe you don't need for the recording. Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Eastside Freedom Library. I'm Peter, one of the co-founders, and am delighted that Dave Kamper, first of all, delighted that he's written this great book, and delighted that he's here for us to discuss it with him. So this is Dave Kamper, who is currently affiliated with the Economic Policy Institute. And speaking with Dave today will be Becca Murtis, who is a rank and file activist in the Flight Attendants Union, hopefully unionizing Delta Airlines. We should all remember that there used to be Northwest Airlines that was unionized, and when they got gobbled up by Delta, Delta managed to de-unionize the workforce, and we need to get them reunionized. Yeah. So I'm going to turn things right over to Dave. Is going to say a bit about the book. Becca's prepared to make some comments. There are copies of the book that Dave is happy to sign for you. And we'll take it from there. Dave.
Thank you. Is the audio okay there? Thank you. Thanks for coming out. This is a strange day to be here. 12 hours ago or so, I thought, well, great, this will be a great, joyous moment for us to come in community, and I'm sure many of you were braving the cold yesterday. And then we had the news this morning of someone else being killed, and it's a bit of a somber day, but it's good to be in community. So I appreciate the chance, and I admit I feel a bit of a jerk talking about my book in the wake of all that. But I wrote the book because by accident I've become an optimist, and it's a time I think we need some optimism. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about that, and then I'll turn it over to Becca to talk about the Delta campaign, because it's one of the most important ones in the country right now. I've been a labor organizer for 25 years. Working in Pennsylvania and Illinois, here in Minnesota. I'm also an historian, and these days I'm at a group called the Economic Policy Institute, which is the labor movement's think tank. I work with some incredibly brilliant economists, one of whose parents are right here, but I would have said the same thing if you weren't here. So I stress that I work with incredibly brilliant economists, and we do research and support on the lives of working people. And the genesis of the book was actually came from my time at EP, and I mentioned this in the book. We were having our Monday morning weekly meeting where we kind of plan out the week ahead, and one of my colleagues on our communications team said, "Hey, there's this union voting on these Amazon workers in Staten Island. Should we give that some attention? As we're the labor movement's think tank. Should we talk about this union election?" And they looked to me, because I'm a labor guy, I've been an organizer for 25 years. I know what I'm doing. And I said, with the absolute confidence that someone from my background can get away with, is they're going to lose. They're going to get killed. There's no reason for us to even, give it any attention, because it's just going to be kind of sad. And of course, then they won. The Amazon Labor Union won that election by a lot. And that triggered in my mind a whole rethink of, I've been a curmudgeon about the labor movement for so long, where I believe in labor, but I've always believed that kind of our best days were behind us, and that our moments, we've let the moments go by. And the last few years, even this last year, have given me tremendous hope in the power of solidarity, because that's really what this is about, is the choice to look at each other and embrace each other and to stand together rather than go out on your own. When I grew up in the labor movement, it was the 1990s. And the cool thing to do in the 1990s was to go off the grid. It was to escape. It was to go detach yourself from the global economy. And it was hard to find people who believed in solidarity. And in the book, I cover all kinds of stories of people from the last few years who found solidarity. I traveled down to Topeka, Kansas, to where they make our Cheetos. And I talked to workers there who led the very first strike that Frito-Lay plant had ever seen, driven by the insane conditions they were working with under COVID, and how they were just driven to the breaking point, and how people joined the union to go on strike. They joined the union so they could go on strike. and listening to them and the great pride with which they talk about making Cheetos. If you ever, like, I know someone who worked at Green Giant, like they will never eat anything from Green Giant because they were there when it got made. The people who work for Frito-Lay, like they're very proud of what they produce, and it made me want to eat more Cheetos. But they, you know, it's a right to work state with very few union rights. They've never pulled off a strike before, and they did because they didn't have anything else to do, and they turned to each other. And the book is filled with stories like that. I have a chapter on the flight attendants, which I'm sure you'll talk about your story more directly, so I'll skip that. But the way in which people stuck together first during COVID, and then in the years since. And one of the other big themes of the book that I'm so excited about is the degree to which younger workers have stepped up in a way that we've just never seen. One of my former or still member of MAPE, the union I used to work for, Claudia's here. When I started with working with the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees in 2013, we had a big planning meeting for the whole union, and I was not yet 40. I was about to turn 40, and I was the third or fourth youngest person in the room. And everyone there said, well, we've got to get young people in. We've got to get young people in. And what was unsaid in the second half of that sentence was, we have to get them to come on our terms. They have to join the union the way we know about it and to be part of it. And instead what we've seen at Starbucks and in higher education institutions around the country and so many other places is young workers saying, heck with it. We're going to do this our way. And you know what? We're going to do it really well because they're doing it with a sophistication and a tactical and strategic intelligence and a sense of comradeship that boggles my mind in a brilliant way, and is something, again, I would never have predicted. The theme of my book is me being wrong about things, just to be clear. But the younger workers are showing, like, they're embracing solidarity, and they're choosing it. And that's something that's really powerful for me. And then the third piece of the book talks about, I've got a piece on COVID and the workers dealing with COVID, and I got a piece on younger workers. And then the third part of the book talks about the three big labor actions of 2022 and 2023, the SAG-AFTRA strike, the huge UPS Teamsters campaign where they won the best contract that UPS workers ever won, and of course the United Auto Workers stand-up strike. And all three of those are cases of long-standing storied unions that have been around from time immemorial, embracing radical change to do things new. SAG-AFTRA, the actors union, and remember your trivia question for any time you want. Who's the only president of the United States to have been president of a union? Ronald Reagan, who was president of the Screen Actors Guild. That union has been fighting with itself forever. They have honest-to-God political parties in that union who fight each other. And in 2022 and 23, they came together and united to take on the studios together to launch their amazing strike with the writers and win. And it was that willingness to embrace in unity. And the Teamsters at UPS, who have been struggling with two-tier contracts for forever, decided to stand up for those on the second tier and the third tier and fight to bring them up, and they did. And then the United Auto Workers launching the most ambitious strike that union's ever seen. And that's saying a lot with the United Auto Workers. Right? They're the people who gave us the Flint sit-down strike. And this was the most ambitious strike they'd ever won, and they succeeded. And all of that has made me an optimist. And that's the thing I want to kind of try to take away from here today, because this is not an optimistic moment based on what happened just a few hours ago. And it's easy to feel Pollyanna-ish in this moment. But there's always challenges. I wish there weren't, and it's tough that there are. But I also know that yesterday there were 50,000 of us in the streets, and it was so cold. And the joy and the togetherness of all that. And it was, I saw 3-4 generations marching together. People with walkers on the icy roads, with people standing around them to keep them from falling, and kids wide-eyed and excited about what was going on. That's the hope that made me write this book. And it's to me, that's the thing I want to carry away from this. We need optimism. We need hope, even in our darkest times. We are stronger than they are. We can win if we stand together. And so I think that's what I'll say about the book now. Becca, I'd love for you to come up and talk specific. The president of the Flight Attendants Union, Sarah Nelson, wrote the foreword to my book. It was a great honor for me that she did. And so I'm thrilled that you're here, because it's one of the most exciting campaigns in labor today. And so I'll pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Dave. All right, hello everybody. My name is Becca Murtis, and I am a Delta Airlines flight attendant, but I'm also part of the fight to get a union back at Delta that was taken away from the Northwest flight attendants. I'm in my 20s and I never experienced what it's like to be in a union, but seeing all this solidarity, especially around what's happening in America and Minneapolis, I think it's a need stronger than ever, especially right now. We're doing really well in the campaign. For those of you that do not know, we have not had this support ever in the campaign, ever since we had the vote back in the 2000s after the merger. People are fed up, especially in today's working class. Sarah Nelson is an inspiration to me. I was kind of thrown into the labor movement. I didn't even know what a union was before I came to Delta or what it meant to be part of one. So being on this campaign, I'm proud not just to call her the leader of flight attendants, but also now my personal friend. She wrote the foreword in this book, and especially reading it during these times puts chills down my spine. If you read that foreword, especially recently, everything that's happening in Minneapolis, I want to say she saw this coming. And I want to do a quote that I read in that book. She wrote, "I write this in February 2025. Our working class is under attack and our democracy is on the verge of collapse due to massive inequality. Reliance on legal protections may prove entirely foolish, but the hope of solidarity coupled with a clear worker agenda may be our only chance to stop oppressive, authoritarian rule, to save our planet and our basic human rights." I'm sorry. I'm just proud to be a fellow Minnesotan right now, standing up and fighting back, and what it truly means to be an American right now. The 4 Ds of union busting, I feel like, is also what's happening in our own world. That's divide, distract, delay, and demoralize. I'm honestly feeling more hopeful than ever standing with all of you here today, and I'm so glad you came out during these trying times. Thank you.
Before you, I'm sorry. I know that was a lot, and I appreciate you so much, but I would love it. Could you tell us all what we can be doing to help you out?
Yeah. Delta has the monopoly here in Minneapolis, so even if we don't want to fly Delta, we're kind of forced to, right? If you wear those pins on the flight, knowing of what our struggle is daily as a flight attendant, I appreciate it. When I see these pins in the airport, I get so happy. Or when people walk by when we're sitting at the visibility table and baggage claim, if you're getting off your flight, come say hi to us, show your support. I feel like a lot of people, they come by and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we had no idea you guys didn't have a union." And I'm like, we are the only ones not part of this club. So it means so much to us seeing that, our community in Minneapolis, even around the United States, supports our fight in this. It means a lot.
And there's buttons at the table right back there, so please do get some. So I'll repeat the question for the audio. There was wondering about the Sun Country and whether or not there's any possibility of a merger and what that might mean. I don't know the answer at all, but I think it was asked for you anyway. So.
I don't know everything about that. Right now, I believe the Sun Country flight attendants are under the Teamsters, and there's something about them going with Legion, which is, I believe, oh my gosh, I'm a bad person. I have no idea what union they're under, but it could be good for them. We'll see. I know sometimes their union plays dirty with them. I hope the best for that merger. If I'm honest, I don't think we need any more mergers in the airlines. That's just me though. I don't know. That's something I'm definitely going to keep an eye on and support our Sun Country flight attendants. They deserve more. So does Allegiant.
If there are other questions or comments, I think Peter's got a microphone.
Just briefly.
If you wait for the mic, if you would, just so for the audio.
Just briefly, I'm a member of the British Labour International, and I've got connections in the UK, originally from there. And we're in the middle of a process calling for a boycott of all travel to Minnesota because of the dangerous situation that exist here. And I'm going to issue all those red cards warning all the travelers that they need to protect themselves and when necessary not to travel to the state.
It's an unfortunate situation that you feel you have to do that because we're such a great state, and we're sitting here in the home of the Hmong archives. Like, Minnesota is a great state because of all the people who've come here from all the generations, including Somalis and Hmong and everyone else. And so for people from other countries feeling hesitant about coming here and having reason to be is so deeply unfortunate.
Dave, can I ask a question? Yeah, and I think that, here we are a day after this general strike, if that's the right word for it, that happened yesterday, where we saw thousands of union members acting together with community members, acting particularly with clergy and indigenous folks. And I know that the media has been asking the question, why is something like that possible in Minnesota? And I wonder if in the stories that you unearth and tell in your book, do you see elements that help explain why yesterday was possible?
I really do. We're sitting in one of them, one of the reasons. Because while I think it's too much to say the East Side Freedom Library is responsible for 50,000 people being on the streets, the East Side Freedom Library as a source of connection, as a place for people to gather. Minnesota, I come originally from Illinois, but I've been here for 16, 17 years now. Minnesota has a sense of community that is real. There's a term historians and economists use called path determinism, which is that sort of things that have happened in your past kind of limit the directions you can go. And Minnesota has, throughout its history, had these moments of choice, sometimes more conscious than others, like the decision to be welcoming to Hmong refugees in the 1970s. The decision to have the Minnesota Miracle in 1970, so we didn't have a property tax revolt like they did in all these other states and turn right-wing against property taxes. Our labor partners here in Minnesota, Minnesota is one of the strongest labor states in the country, and not just in terms of numbers. But I work in my day job. I talk to organizations across the country, and everybody talks about Setool, the worker center here in Minneapolis, as the model of a worker center that everyone else in the country wants to replicate. Setool, CTUL, Centro de Trabajadores Unidos en la Lucha, Center for Workers United in Struggle. I'm sorry, I apologize for butchering the Spanish. But it's a worker center that has done amazing things for both Spanish-speaking workers, but all kinds of folks across the Twin Cities. They've been at it for years, and they've been successful. And compared to many other parts of the country, we're much more united here in the Twin Cities. It's not that it's perfect, but unions can look to each other with far greater enthusiasm. The Minneapolis strike of teachers in 2022, which I do cover in the book. You went to those picket lines. Every union was there. Every union was there. Everybody came out to those picket lines because it's an automatic here in Minnesota that you stand with each other. And that sense of community, that's the same thing as us having a strong public radio station and us having more theater seats per capita than any other place in the country, is the same kind of community that builds labor solidarity and that brings people together on a picket line or at a bargaining table or in negotiations. And so all these things, like we have built something together over the years that is genuinely unique in this country, and people should be learning from us. They should be learning from the way that all the labor federations, which in most other parts of the country are quiet, sedate little bodies, the Minneapolis and St. Paul regional labor federations, but also the ones in greater Minnesota, called out and stood up for yesterday's action. They were bold and assertive, but in a Minnesotan way, like we're going to stand up for each other. You don't see that from other central labor bodies, even in supposedly liberal places like in New York and elsewhere. You don't see that happen, but you see it here. It's that ability to look out for each other that we really bring to what we do, that I think is part of what's thematically in the book as well. So, yeah. And this would be a good time to remind you that there's a donation bucket for the Freedom Library over there, and that they're always happy to take a donation. So if you want to help support this institution, please do. Did you want to add anything to that
Yesterday I was really proud to be standing amongst, and I'm sure many of you were there as well. It was so cold, miserable, but I just felt so proud, especially knowing that that whole setup was set up by unions. To get the whole entire city together was because of our labor. And when I saw some of my coworkers there, especially ones who are maybe more left-leaning, but they won't sign the union card, I feel like that stood so proud to those people who are like on the fence. I'm like, this is what solidarity looks like when we come together. We're not against each other. We can all agree on the same thing. And I don't know, I thought that was beautiful.
Claudia?
So even to thinking about yesterday's action, my union was, we can't endorse this. We can't endorse this because we can't endorse a strike. We'll get decertified. How do you feel I don't know what my question is, I guess, but just in terms of the extra legal strikes, and what does it look like to have wildcat action, or the unions that are really were operating inside Pelra and everything. What does it take for us to be able to exercise our abilities outside of where we're only allowed to strike at the end of our contract after all of these things? Working toward general strike kind of question. What does that look like?
Yeah, I as an historian, I would point out to you that it's never been easy. We look back. I just finished rereading Sidney Fine's book on the Flint sit-down strike, and we look back on that and we treat it as though it was almost a spontaneous uprising by workers. That we've had it. We're going to stand on top of our thing with the union sign like Norma Ray, and all of a sudden we're out on strike. No, my goodness, no. They had the plan, and they struggled, and they argued, and they fought with each other, and they were anxious about it, and not everyone participated, and the people who didn't participate were mad at the people who did, and some of the people who were in then left and got mad, and there was danger, and there was drama, and some of it was deeply personal, and some of it was structural, and there was all these things. And everywhere you go in history and you see a moment that we now look upon as being some kind of glorious triumph was highly contingent, highly chancy, and required whole numbers of people to engage in radical acts of bravery, but also to be smart, to be patient, to be strategic, to have an idea of what they were going for, and to be willing again and again and again to take one step, even if you wanted to take 10, so you could get that step. And so, people who worked for the state of Minnesota, who felt like state labor law was going to look poorly upon a wildcat strike, and to go from a union that has struck once but that didn't really count to doing that is a heavy leap. So I would encourage folks who are in unions now, or who are not in unions but who are workers and who are doing things, what's the next thing you can do? What's the next step you can take? And how can you sit down with your own members and talk about why it matters? Paul F. Clark's Building More Effective Unions, short little pamphlet, talks about 3 reasons why people get engaged in their union. And the first 2 are ones that anyone who does unions know. 1, they believe in what the union's doing. Number 2, they got asked. And often we stop there. We say, okay, well, if someone believes in what they're doing and we ask them, they'll get involved. But Paul Clark notes a third piece, which is that they have to see the connection between their involvement and the outcome they want to reach. Joining for the sake of joining, that does generally include the audience of people who come to the East Side Freedom Library. But for many, many other workers out there, joining for the sake of joining is not enough. They need to understand, why is it worth it to my mental energy, my psychic energy, my emotional energy, my time, to be involved in this. And we've got to draw out for them. This is why your involvement here is going to make a difference here, which is going to make a difference here, which is going to get us to the place we want to go. And that requires patience and it requires time. I entered the University of Illinois as a graduate student in 1996 as a Republican, as a conservative. I got organized by my union colleagues, and they organized me that way by showing me why it mattered that I stepped up, that showing me that it mattered that I was a part of this. Not just that it was a good thing and I should agree with them that they're right, but that it mattered why I was involved and why others were involved. And there's people undergoing that moment all over the country all the time. A whole bunch of them just had that experience yesterday out in the streets. They saw that they mattered. And that's the piece that I think we've got to continue to take with us. And so I don't want to pretend, Claudia, to have a specific strategy for you around the strike, though I will say, the only illegal strike is an unsuccessful strike. But that's, again, really easy for me to say, given that I wouldn't be the person going on strike. And I'm always hesitant to say, you over there go on strike, because that's not a great way to go. But it's all about connecting people's own experience, their own engagement, their own beliefs to the thing we want to achieve. What we're facing now is a I'm going to say tyranny, I think I'm okay with the word, that wants us to feel like we are powerless. And see how I'm just going to work, but the title of my book is Who's Got the Power? We need to see that we have the power, but we've got to lay it out. We've got to draw it out and see for ourselves how that power works. And people will respond to that. They will. And the Flint sit-down strike, people joined the union to go on strike, just like they did at Frito-Lay. The action was the catalyst that drove people. It can happen. What do you think about this?
I mean, you just said a lot. So, there's several things to think about there. I'm not usually good with on-the-spot questions like that. I need to really think about what I have to say. I do say that it's really inspiring for me. I also grew up in a very conservative household, and I thought I was a Republican at least until I was 18. And you get into the real world and kind of experience everything as it is. I grew up with the simple morals of have empathy for other people, don't judge people by their skin. And, my parents are not supportive of what I'm doing right now, and we don't really talk about it. So I am happy that I have found family, especially here in Minneapolis, with people that support me, especially, my coworkers on the campaign working together. So it is kind of hard for me to talk about, especially with family. When I see people, especially striking and supporting us flight attendants, it does mean so much, watching people from the sideline, especially the Starbucks workers. I talk to them sometimes, and, go out on the picket lines, and it feels so good that we can both say, especially people and more women or homosexuals in this industry, where we can honestly get together and be we understand what you're going through and what it means to fight against this. Because, we're not the auto workers. We're not, out there in the steel mills. This is a female dominated industry, and having that is so important.
If I can follow up, because you talked about building the union as a place to build community, what specific things have you experienced in the AFA that it's really helped you made you feel like the union's a family and community? I'm interested to hear more about that. With
Delta, you have to be very careful of who you talk to, where you're talking about it. There's a massive fear-mongering situation that we go through. I don't post a lot of things on social media, scared that my coworkers will turn me in for what my thoughts are. We have several firings in the past. You have to be so careful. And I feel like when I am around people, especially supportive of the labor movement, or even my coworkers, I feel like it is a safe space where we can talk about what we believe in without that fear. We have snitch culture, but it is scary. You're always looking behind your back and be careful about what you say, because we don't have a union to protect us from that. I think a really good example of especially what's happening right now is that United has in their contract, if you are even in their contract, if you are taken as a prisoner of war or any circumstances under that, you are paid, protected, and you will not lose your job. I cannot say the same for that.
Wow. It's not a risk in my job, I'll tell you. Thank you for that.
And I even do video. Good Lord. I should know this. Howard Kling. So you mentioned SATUL, Center for Workers United in Struggle. And so disclosure, I'm doing a documentary about their entire existence so far. And I actually have a question I don't know the answer to. I mean, which I guess why it's a question. But their approach to organizing workers involved, I would say this phrase, get workers together and bring their problems together, not so that we can solve it for them, so we can solve them together. And they did this all the time, over and over and over again. And they eventually unionized or they didn't, but the the big box store retail janitors wound up unionizing, going with SEIU Local 26, and they said they're the best members they've ever had because they understand all this stuff. I've tried to think, how could we do that very thing? You know, I'm not anti-leadership and all that, but at the same time, union members feel disempowered a lot. You know, this comes from, you know, the switch to business unionism, you know, and the history we've been through. But I'm really like not sure how to apply, how to even have workers get into that an educational situation where they can appreciate that. But it seems very necessary to and so if you guys have any thoughts or ideas about that in real unions, so.
Yeah, I mean, SATUL is such an amazing site for that, but it's also true that what they've done, like there is no like mystic chemistry they have. They get workers together, have workers talk to each other, have workers share together, and build power. And one of the challenges we face today is, I think, an institutional labor culture that is fearful of that. And I will say, my defensive statement here is that I think I can understand it to a certain degree. You know, when I first started working for the unions in the early aughts, like the people I worked with had been through the 80s and the 90s where all that happened was you got defeated. Like you were constantly in retreat. You were constantly under assault. And surviving with a union at all was a victory. And a lot of those folks got into a hunkered down mindset. And they also got into a mindset, and this is unfortunate, but I can understand it, of dampening expectations. We don't want to get people too excited because frankly, we're not going to win much. And frankly, in 1988, you weren't. And this is one of the reasons why I'm thrilled to see like the Starbucks workers and someone who's a younger worker at AFA, because you're not carrying that baggage that people from that generation carry. And I think what the people at SATUL did is they just decided to ignore all of that. And there's other examples here in the Twin Cities. I think the St. Paul Federation of Educators is pound for pound the most powerful educator union in the country. And if you look at what they do again and again and again, the way they operate as a union is they put workers into rooms to talk to each other. And they just do it all the time in all kinds of ways. They do open bargaining where all their negotiations happen with all their members in the room to watch. And then the members do breakouts and they talk to each other about it. But they also do it just in general. Like they'll have building meetings and bring their teachers, all the teachers and all the aides in the rooms together to just talk about what's going on. And creating that space for communication is something that unfortunately a lot of people in the labor movement are allergic to. And it's deeply unfortunate. Years ago, I was sort of like a consultant for unions, not really, but I would go around with a colleague. We'd go to different unions around the country and we'd sort of do assessments. And the first question we always asked the leaders when we were trying to assess their union says, when you make a big decision as a union, how many rank and file members do you talk to about it before you make their decision? And every time that answer to that question told you all you needed to know about that union. If the answer was, well, you know, we held a meeting, no one came, so we made the decision. Whereas if it was, yep, we split up the list and every one of us goes out and makes sure we do 15 one-on-ones with people we've never met before and we hear their story, like you knew that was a great union, even if they were struggling, even if they were having challenges. But it requires conscious will to do that. It was a lot of time and effort to do that. It takes energy. And so it's a virtuous cycle once you can start it, but getting it started is really hard. And I wish I had an answer past that. I spent a lot of time just talking now to get to I don't know, but that's where I'm getting to. Did you want to add anything?
Not to that. I don't have an answer for that one.
Down that side, then
It may have already been answered, but it may have like slipped my mind because it was answered in a kind of different way than I was anticipating. But like I have friends that are in unions, but it's still a hierarchy. Whereas like they're in the union, yet the people above them do not allow them to still participate or become more. And so thus I'm still wondering, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I've been thinking about it quite often. What's the point of the union if you can't do union? Like, if you can't be a union because you still have to get granted permission, then where's the union in the union?
Yeah, I mean, unions are human institutions run by humans. Not all of them are doing a great job of it. My first union, I was 15 years old bagging groceries in suburban Chicago. And I was a member of the United Food and Commercial Workers, which is a perfectly good union. The local I was a member of, the leaders eventually ended up going to prison. I didn't know that at the time. But I never saw a copy of my contract. I'm not sure I even knew I had a contract. If there were union meetings, I was never invited to them. If there were elections, I was never given an opportunity to vote. I got a newsletter every quarter or so telling me who to boycott. And that was my whole experience of the union. And if that was all I'd ever had, I would kind of think they were a massive waste of time, because it frankly was a massive waste of time. And I was 15, so frankly all my benefits were covered by child labor laws anyway. I didn't get much out of it. Now, it's also true that I was working with full-time checkers there who in 1991 were making $26 an hour with health insurance. And the union got that too, but I didn't know that. And that disconnect had happened sometime before I got there. You know, that disconnect between what the union meant to them and what it meant to me. The best resource for this, I'll make a plug for them, is the folks at Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a newspaper, but it's also an institution that does workshops, and they have a big conference coming up in the spring in Chicago. LaborNotes.org. They're a fantastic entity, and they've got books. What do you do when your union breaks your heart? Is a book they have, and they have resources for folks, and they're a great place to go and connect with folks who are dealing with that kind of thing. It's a real problem. It remains one. Very few unions live the perfect life that we want them to live. Very few unions are fortunate to have a leader like Sarah Nelson, who's genuinely the leader we want her to be. There's just not as many of them as there should be, so it's tough. But here in the Twin Cities, we've got a vibrant labor community. We've also got the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, EWOC, which has a huge slew of volunteers which meet and help workers, both with and without unions, to help in their situation. There are places for you to connect with, and there are folks who want to help. It's a heavy lift sometimes, but there are folks who want to help.
You know, I do get that question a lot when trying to organize, and why do I need a union? I don't see the point in it for myself. I think hearing you answer that did, fill me up with hope and maybe an answer to their question in the future. Because as I am new to this labor, but even the past year, there is so much I don't know, or what I'm even talking about, or who to even resource when I have a question like that. So I do think that's a really valid question, because a lot of flight attendants ask that same thing. It's this hierarchy, like, well, I can't ever say anything, they're not going to do anything for me, and I don't know. But yeah, that was a really good question. I think it was a really good question.
If I can ask another, and Becca, I want to ask you, the organizing at Delta is unusual in that workers in very different occupations are all organizing and are organizing in different unions.
Yeah.
So there's the flight attendants, there's the mechanics, there's the baggage handlers, and then I don't know what we say about the pilots, but and I wonder what kind of interaction are you experiencing that goes beyond your own occupational group? And how is the union campaign something that, like yesterday's march and protest, that people are working across boundaries that they've typically had?
You know, flight attendants are an awful, I don't want to say awful breed. They're hard to herd around. You know, everybody lives everywhere for, you know, they commute to Minneapolis, but they live in Florida. So it's hard to manage everyone to get together. And in like, you know, Starbucks store, we need to organize 30,000 people versus like 12. So that makes it so hard. I feel like I'm kind of an odd one out. Ever since I got involved, I want to get involved in everybody's union, like Starbucks. I, you know, volunteer with IAM when I can to help our, you know, ramp and our tower when I can. But I feel like it's hard to get people to even come out to this. I was the only one. But I'm happy to put my time towards everybody. You know, Starbucks, our ramp. Because the more people, even outside of ourselves, it speaks so much volumes, especially with the ramp. I mean, we work with them every day. We don't see them. I know they're below me filling the bags up, but like, just to have us both unionizing at the same time and working together says so much instead of separate entities, because Delta wants us to feel divided from our rampers. So I want to give them more support. You know, they need everybody in it. Same with us. If we work together, it's just that much better. It says so much more.
Anyone else?
I just got a quick question. I studied history in England and the UK, got a degree in labor history. And the question that always came up was, America's doing well, you know, but why don't they have a genuine socialist workers' party that is born out of the trade union movement, like the British Labour Party came out of the trade union movement through a long history. The unions came to a point where they realized that organizing on the factory floor was limited up to a point of compensation, contracts, protecting the rights of workers. And then they finally, in 1900, made the move to say, we need legislation that's bigger than that. And that led to the formation of a genuine, at that time, working class party with socialist objectives. So they say, well, what happened in America?
Well, good. If you have the next 7 hours, we can start that conversation. And frankly, Peter's probably more equipped to answer than others. But the one thing I would say, and I do mention this in the book, because while I'm a partisan of labor, we have our dark sides, is that racism, sexism, and xenophobia are a big part of this. There's a particular moment that always galled me. It's someday I hope to write a book on it. The Pullman strike, 1894. The Pullman workers who built the Pullman cars were on strike, and Eugene Debs, who many people know the name of, later on socialist candidate for president, was leading the American Railway Union. And in the middle of this strike, a major strike against a major employer, the American Railway Union has its convention in Chicago, where the strike is happening. And at that convention, while the strike is happening, the Pullman porters, who, if you know American history, Pullman porters were overwhelmingly black. The Pullman porters come to the American Railway Union and say, we will join your strike, and therefore break the company, because without people who make the trains or the people who run the trains, we're going to win this strike, if you let us into your union. And the American Railway Union looked at that and said, we can win the strike and have class solidarity, or we can be racists. And they said, no, thank you, black people, stay away. And that I am slightly simplifying that story, but not by much. And American history is full of these moments. And this is one of the great things about what happened yesterday, is that, and in the Twin Cities in general, though there are exceptions, in the Twin Cities in general, the standing up for immigrant populations, standing up for black and brown folks in the streets is something that labor does here better than many other parts of the country. So that's as short an answer as I can possibly get. But what do you think? Mike Davis, probably the best person to read on this? Prisoners of the American Dream, and yeah.
Hi, Becca. I was wondering if you had any idea of a timeline or like how this will play out and what to expect, and besides wearing buttons, like how we might fit in.
I mean, tell your friends. I mean, we are so close in this campaign without saying like any numbers out loud. We're very careful with that. But if we could get every expired signed card, somebody who's already signed a card and they let it expire past the 1 year, we would have our union. We are so close. Talking to the general public, I would love to come to more events and talk, and so that we can get the word out to every labor union in Minneapolis. But my hope is to get Minneapolis to where I want it to be, so I can go out to Atlanta, the South, the mothership, the scary place, and take them on, get our flight attendants on board with what's happening. When it comes to the general public, it is hard because we don't do donations or anything like that. When we have rallies, especially like at the airport with other unions, we want everyone to come. And I know with all of you guys in here, you're there at every event, and I can rely on you for that. I mean, that is a really good question for you guys, but I wish I had a better answer besides just like, oh, wear a pin. I mean, that really is all you can do, and just spread the word. And I would appreciate that so much.
I mean, you're in a situation where you have legitimate concerns about your safety as an employee if you were seen. None of us have that concern. We can be as loud and proud for Delta workers as we can be. And I guarantee you somewhere in your extended circle of acquaintances is somebody who works for Delta. Like, it's got to be like, just, it's a big employer. And sooner, if you are loud and proud, what was it Mao about swimming in a sea, right? That the sea that these workers swim in should be one that's friendly to unions and one that is comfortable to them. And if that worker at Delta knows that they've got a cousin who puts something up on Facebook in support of their union, is that alone going to shift them? Probably not. But is it the thing that helps them along the way? It probably is.
You pretty much said what I wanted to say, but made it make sense.
This has been a tough day. I really appreciate you all coming out for this. I enjoyed the chance to be here in community with you all. And again, please do support the library. Peter, do you want to tell us about some of the other events coming up at the library so people can stay connected here?
Well, we're doing a labor film series. There are flyers on the counter. The next film will be, I have to say, my all-time favorite film, Salt of the Earth. And that will be the third Thursday evening in February. And we have two really terrific people who will be leading the conversation after the film. On the third Thursday evening in March, we're going to be screening a film called A Bug's Life, and are hoping to draw a family audience for that film. I will be starting this coming Monday night teaching a labor history and organizing class on 8 consecutive Monday nights here from 6:30 to 8 p.m. I'm co-teaching that with Carson Starkey, who's part of the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee and an organizer with the Carpenters Union. So it's officially through St. Paul Public Schools, Adult and Community Ed. Please feel free to come. So that's starting this Monday night at 6:30. We have a sign-up list. If you haven't signed up and given us your email, please do, and you'll receive once a month electronic newsletter lets you know what else is going on here. If you have ideas for things you would like to see happen here, let us know. So we don't think of this as we produce and you consume, but rather the way Dave has been talking about the inner life of unions when they're healthy. It's something that we would like to have here at the Eastside Freedom Library. If you know middle and high school kids who might be doing National History Day projects, send them here. We have a team of mentors every Saturday morning working with middle and high school kids, 3 of whom last year won first or second prize nationally, doing very progressive, great topics. And part of what's been so inspiring about the last couple of weeks is high school kids and the walkout of kids from 7 St. Paul high schools, and to see these kids building solidarity and then interested in learning about the labor movement. It's pretty good. So thank you for asking. Yeah, great. One last chance? I will return the favor to Dave and say, even if you already have a copy of Dave's book, maybe there's somebody else in your life who needs a copy too. This is a great opportunity to get one and to get it signed. So, and thank you all for coming. Great.